Hey everybody, I just threw a bunch of snails in Butterbean's tank. My snail tank is going crazy with the breeding of the snails. I've got a gajillion little tiny snails everywhere. I've got snail eggs everywhere, but they're all really tiny. So the one you see him eating now is probably one of the larger ones I put in the tank. So he already had his dinner tonight. His normal staple food is freeze-dried krill. But I wanted to shoot a little bit of video of him tonight. I wanted to talk about this tank a little bit. And he's always just so fun to watch eat, and they're just so curious and interesting that it's never going to hurt him to throw a couple of little snails in there. And then gives him something to do and distracts him a little bit while I'm trying to shoot video, although he's always very, very aware of me being here with the camera shining on him. The new LED I've got on this tank, it has a lot of blue light in it. It's an LED made for a planted tank, and therefore it's got the red and blue LEDs on it. And that increased amount of blue light really picks up the blue in his eyes. And it just makes all of his colors really pop when he's up at the front of the tank. So in that regard, I kind of like this new LED. It just makes him look gorgeous. But at the same time, it makes the tank look a little unnatural. I know it's good for the plants and everything, but these are such low light need plants that it's not really that much of a concern. I don't really need an LED that's designed for a planted tank. I could get away with some old worn out fluorescent tubes in this tank probably, with just some Java fern growing in there. And being that it's in brackish water, it tends to grow pretty slowly. So the thing I wanted to mention about this tank is actually the Java fern. If you look at it, it's always hard to tear my eyes or camera away from Butterbean when he's in there swimming around. But if you'll notice the fern as I'm panning around the tank, you will see that it's got little Swiss cheese holes in it everywhere. Now typically I would assume that that's from snails, but I can't imagine that much damage being done by snails in a tank with Butterbean here. I mean, what are we doing right now? We're watching him cruise the tank hunting for snails. How long do you think a snail would last out in the open, sitting out on a leaf like that, before he cruised by and munched it up? I don't know what else would be chewing little holes in the leaves. And then the really interesting part is it's not as though the hole's been chewed out of the leaf. It's more like a hole has been punched in the leaf. Because if you look over here, you see all these little bits that are swirling around and all that little stuff floating on the surface. It's little round plugs of leaf. I got a bunch of them out the other day. See, there's a good one right in front of us. That's a great example of it. It's just little round pieces of leaf. So something is chewing the holes into these leaves in more of like a scissor-like motion. They're not consuming what's in the center of the hole. They're sort of just cutting it out and letting it float off into the tank and leaving a hole behind. Either that or the plant is growing in a really unusual manner. The brackish water might have something to do with it's not getting nutrients properly or something. I can't imagine that. I've got it very low end brackish, and Java fern does well enough in brackish water. I mean, you can grow brackish Java fern in brackish water, so I don't know why that would be the issue. So I do throw a lot of snails in this tank, and that's, I guess logically that's what I've got to go with. That certainly looks like snail damage, and I do throw snails in this tank all the time, so it's not like that would be out of the question. It just really seems odd to me that I'd see this much snail damage in a tank that's got you know, pretty much a specialized snail eater in there. So, I don't know. Like I said, make what you want of that. If you've got your own theory as to why I've got little Swiss cheese holes in all of my plants, I'd love to hear it. You know, otherwise, I'm just going to go with it's probably the snails in there. I'm considering adding a couple of females to go with my 2 male mollies here. Not really sure how that would work out with Butterbean, though. He doesn't seem to be too bothered by these mollies. They seem to be more interested in themselves than him, but if they get a little too aggressive, too close to him or whatever, it tends to annoy him. But, I mean, you can see he's not really bothered by him, and they're right next to him there. I think maybe the first week or two they were in the tank, it was a little different, but he's sort of gotten used to him now, and it's not really that big a deal at all. So, I don't know, but they're such beautiful fish. I'd almost curious about breeding them. I did get a lyre-tail creamsicle molly to breed with another fish, but that never did well. It just kind of never really ate, and gradually it got thinner and thinner, and eventually that one died. So that one never made it out of my quarantine period, I'll say. It didn't make it, you know, it wasn't in the quarantine tank, but it was still within that first couple of weeks of me buying it. So that's sort of like my window. When you buy fish from the big chain pet store, I don't really start getting any kind of attachment to them until I've had them for a few weeks, because it's not unlikely for them not to make it. So that might have something to do with my water, but that's more for other videos. We've been talking about my water chemistry in some of my other videos. I'm trying to add some calcium and some mineral ions to my water without shifting the pH or hardness around too much. But as I said, there's more videos on that in other playlists. So make sure you're subscribed, and then that way you won't miss anything with that or with this tank. Don't forget, this is my brackish tank, and that is my figure 8 puffer Butterbean. Hope you enjoyed. I'll see you real soon in the next one.